C'est bon. Bonjour à toutes, bonjour à tous, ici dans la salle, mais en ligne également. Je m'appelle Sophie Fallaha, je suis la directrice générale du CEIMIA. Ça me fait chaud au cœur de voir une telle audience réunie aujourd'hui pour une discussion sur un sujet tellement important que l'égalité en intelligence artificielle. Cet événement va être en anglais, parce que là encore, dans une perspective de rassembler divers points de vue, d'avoir une portée internationale, l'événement est international et donc l'anglais sera la langue de présentation. Par ailleurs, si tout au long de l'événement, lors des discussions, vous préférez vous exprimer en français, n'hésitez pas à le faire et on s'assurera de traduire la question auprès des intervenants auxquels vous posez vos questions. So good morning, afternoon, and evening, everyone, in person and online. My name is Sophie Fallaha. I'm the Executive Director of CEIMIA, the International Center of Expertise in Montreal on AI. CEIMIA is supporting the Global Partnership on AI and is also a proud partner of Mila in delivering the project that we're launching today, the Transformative AI Policy for Gender Equality and Diversity work that we are launching today. Perhaps just also kind of note of intro to get the context. The Global Partnership on AI, the GPAI, is a multi-stakeholder engagement between government and experts, now merged in an integrated partnership with the OECD. And our role is to implement human-centric, safe, secure, and trustworthy AI based on principles of the OECD recommendation on AI. And before diving into our official launch of today and really rich discussions, we would like to begin by acknowledging that Mila and CEIMIA are located on unceded indigenous lands. The Kanien'kehá:ka Nation, is recognized as the custodians of the lands and waters on which we gather today. Totiake, Montreal, is historically known as a gathering place for many First Nations. Today, it is home to a diverse population of Indigenous and other peoples. We respect the continued connections with the past, present, and future in an ongoing relationship with Indigenous and other peoples within the Montreal community. Mila and CEIMIA acknowledge the systemic barriers that Indigenous peoples face with respect to education, employment, land, and technology. Indigenous knowledge and science have typically been devalued, excluded, and erased from AI science, and we therefore recognize the need for a commitment to work with Indigenous peoples in AI research and science. And today we're here to talk about transformative policies towards a real gender equality and diversity in AI. We'll present the results of a very hard and thorough work conducted over the past 2 years that involved more than 200 people coming from a broad range of stakeholders, researchers, people from marginalized communities, civil society representatives, experts on diversity issues, and policymakers in more than 50 countries. So results are presented in two main outputs, a report, but also a step-by-step policy guide to support policymakers in their effort to transform the industry into becoming more inclusive and diverse. But first, it is my honor to give the floor to the Honourable Anita Anand, President of the Treasury Board, who was kind enough to find a bit of time for us in her very busy schedule to talk about this important issue. Madame la Ministre Anand, la parole est à vous. Minister Anand, the floor is yours.
Merci beaucoup et bonjour tout le monde. C'est un grand plaisir de vous voir ce matin virtuellement. And I wanted to thank you for your work, obviously, especially the launch of this new report on transformative AI policy for gender equality and diversity, topics that have been close to my heart for decades and decades, and now certainly as president of the Treasury Board, having the ability to impact the use of AI and address these issues in the context of AI is very important and rewarding for me. So let me thank the GPAI, the CEIMIA, and Mila for your important work on the report and on the policy guide. Et peut-être je pourrais mentionner aussi que le travail que vous faites pour nous aider à atteindre l'égalité dans l'intelligence artificielle est crucial pour l'avancement et la transformation de cet écosystème. Now, over the last few years, AI has evolved to a place where it has the potential to open new ways of doing things, and that includes in government services and government responsibilities. At the same time, and this goes without saying, and it is the basis on which we are all here today, if not used responsibly, it could have life-changing consequences for the people who use it. And for Government of Canada matters, that means the population of our country. So I'm very honored that you asked me to speak today, but I also see the rationale in having someone from the Government of Canada responsible for 40 million people speaking to the use of AI in government services. So what we are doing, and as we explore the use of AI, what we are committed to is ensuring that it is used responsibly and that it is governed with clear values, with ethics and rules. Alors que nous entreprenons des étapes importantes pour utiliser la puissance de l'IA afin de stimuler la croissance économique et d'améliorer les vies, nous continuons aussi à le faire avec une approche centrée sur l'humain. Specifically, what am I talking about? Well, we're taking into consideration some of the key issues like openness and transparency, avoiding bias, equity of access, safety, security, and ethics. Big, large concepts that need to find meaning in the use and rollout of AI in the public service. So let me give you some examples. So to prevent bias and discrimination on automated decision-making. That directive ensures that AI applications with implications for clients are transparent, with strict safeguards and human oversight in place. So driven by humans, but utilized for large purposes for efficiency gains. We also have a guide on the use of generative AI. Actually, that was one of the first things I took on when coming in as minister in July 2023, and I've published 2 iterations of this guide on the use of generative AI, essentially saying, look, public servants, you can use AI in your daily lives. In order for you to do that, we want to make sure that there's some managerial oversight to manage potential risks, such as generating inaccurate information or amplifying stereotypes, but AI in the public service is something that can and should be used. In addition, the guide includes best practices to enhance generative AI reliability and trustworthiness by upholding fair and inclusive practices that meet the needs of diverse communities. So why is this necessary? There are 2 aspects of systemic bias that can be reproduced in AI, and I suspect you will spend a lot of the day talking about them, and I thought I would just mention them, at least give you my take on what they are. The first is the garbage in, garbage out point, which focuses on bias that can be inherent in training data. For example, New York Times fueling the ChatGPT platform. That's the first bias that we have to be concerned about. What is the training data that is being used for the AI platform? The second aspect of systemic bias that I'm particularly concerned about is bias embedded by humans who are making the decisions on how to train and design a particular model. So the danger is that the AI outputs appear neutral, they appear rational, and they appear unbiased, but the harm is actually potentially there, but certainly covert. And there's a normalization that can occur with the imperialism of a certain worldview. And so my plea and my call is that women and minorities and people alive to these issues are also working in the field. And I hope as well that the conference today will also be based on a theme along those lines. So we do need to diversify the AI workforce, if you will. Et enfin, en septembre, j'ai annoncé que le Canada développe une stratégie sur le IA pour la fonction publique fédérale. So this is unprecedented in the sense that we haven't had a strategy for AI and the public service. And this strategy is going to align responsible AI efforts across the federal government. It's also going to accelerate responsible AI adoption to enhance productivity of public servants, to increase our capacity for science and research, and deliver better digital services for Canadians. Le rapport, le guide politique lancé aujourd'hui sont des outils indispensables qui aideront les dirigeants et les parties prenantes à transformer l'industrie de l'IA. And in doing so, what you are doing is creating AI systems, or at least helping to create these systems, which are more safe, more robust, and actually more representative of the whole population. And so I want to thank you so much in closing for your incredible work and for your commitment to ensuring gender equality and diversity in the AI ecosystem. And I know and can say firmly that AI within the public service takes an approach that is grounded in human rights, in transparency, and in the protection of personal information. And if I could leave you with one thought that really typifies how I approach this subject in my daily work, it is that we must ensure that AI decision-making is not embedded with destructive and discriminatory biases. And I'll close by saying, as we did during COVID, we will continue to use all the tools at our disposal, including AI, to make great and equitable changes to improve service delivery for Canadians. Donc avec ça, je vais arrêter et aussi merci de m'avoir invité et d'être ici avec vous. C'est un grand plaisir pour moi. Merci.
Mille merci, Madame la Ministre. Thank you very much, Minister Anand, for your time and support for this landmark work, but also for the inspiring work that you have been doing on your side as well. And I think you pinpointed already a few of the challenges that we will be tackling today, and saying that perhaps those starting by saying that, yes, AI offers tremendous opportunities for social good, but this wealth of possibility can and must be harnessed equitably. So this project really sought to provide a path towards substantive equality in AI ecosystems, so considering actions for enabling the participation of all voices. We seek to transform the paradigms of who can participate in AI, and where and how, democratizing its development, deployment, and governance for the benefit of everyone. And we acknowledge that we all have blind spots, conscious and unconscious, and the risk with AI is that these blind spots have the potential to be replicated and exacerbated to a far greater degree. And this is why diversity is so important in the industry. So the more diverse we are, the less blind spots we collectively have. And today we're gathered to celebrate the effort of many people. I already mentioned the number a bit earlier, more than 200 that worked to that report, actively acting in the favor of a greater diversity and equality in AI. We launched this important report and work, but also a step-by-step guide for policymakers that want to transform their AI ecosystem into a more inclusive one. So the program for today will be split into 3 main sessions, I would say. First, we will have the project co-leads that will present the results. And in my notes, it's written in just 1 minute, so that's a challenge. We will see if you guys accept it. Second session will be a series of lightning talks where we will hear about some promising practices. And the third session where we'll have a discussion with key collaborators in the project. And of course, we'll have a coffee break and final remarks as well. So first session, I would like to introduce the project co-leads, starting with Paola Ricaurte, who is a full professor in the Department of Media and Digital Culture at Tecnológico de Monterrey, and a faculty associate at the Berkman Klein Center for Internet and Society at Harvard University. Paola co-founded Tierra Común and serves on several expert committees, including the Global Partnership on AI and the UNESCO AI Ethics Experts Without Border Networks. Benjamin Prud'homme is the Vice President of Policy, Safety and Global Affairs at Mila, Quebec AI Institute, where his work is focused on AI governance, safety and human rights, with a focus on multilateral forums. He's also involved in the OECD AI Network, the United Nations Consultative Network of Experts, and the UNESCO's AI Ethics Experts Without Borders as well. So, Paola and Benjamin, the floor is yours for the presentation of the report.
Merci, Sophie. Thanks, everyone, for coming, especially today with this beautiful weather. It really is a pleasure to have you here at Mila to celebrate, really, the launch of the report and the policy guide that comes with it, entitled Towards Substantive Equality in AI, Transformative AI Policy for Gender Equality and Diversity. This is the result, really, of like 2 years of work of hundreds of people. So while Paola and I will have a significant chunk, I guess, of the time today, I want us to kind of gather here, seeing and thinking of everybody that's been part of making this report. The idea that we had was to make sure, in a way, that this report could be useful and impactful. And so the way in which we've structured it is that we've proposed key recommendations and promising practices that could be applied by a range of stakeholders, but quite focused on policymakers. So what policymakers can do, can implement to increase inclusion, diversity, and gender equality, so that ecosystems are more equitable. And I do want to acknowledge that the project was born as a proposal in the Responsible AI Working Group of the Global Partnership on AI, and profoundly supported by CEIMIA, the Center of Expertise in Montreal, throughout those 2 years. Sorry, and we'll talk a bit more about it earlier, but Wanda Munoz, who isn't physically with us today, is I want to say, the mother of the project, the person that's really brought it forward into those instances. So a few words about the report. It is one of the first reports that takes a comprehensive approach to address gender inequality and lack of diversity in AI through transformative AI policy recommendations. So the idea here is not band-aids, but actual structural change to address some of those issues. And some of the key elements that we've put forward, the first one is that we've anchored the definitions within the OECD principles, as well as the UNESCO recommendation on the ethics of AI. These are two of the most leading global instruments that we have right now, and the idea here was to make sure that we do not duplicate, that we do not create fragmentation in the ecosystem, but rather that we kind of build upon what we have and take it forward. The second key principle is that we have based all of our work on the human rights-based approach. For a lot of you, that might sound kind of usual or not something to notice, but it is actually not something that is quite frequent in the global AI governance space currently. And that's something that we thought was really, really key in addressing some of those questions. The third piece is that we take a gender equality and diversity lens, by working for transformative change and for substantial equality. And I kind of want to double click on transformative and substantive. So the idea here is to make sure, again, that the work is structural, that we really move the needle. But also, we've had a lot of conversations around, do we talk about substantial equality or what other words? The idea here is to really, really emphasize the fact that formal equality is, of course, essential, but it really isn't anywhere near sufficient to create the change we're looking for. And the reason why this is important, in our opinion, is that, one, we didn't want, again, to replicate, but we wanted to take forward. The second piece is, and my colleague Paola will talk more about that, but we've built those key recommendations really profoundly based on the needs and experiences of people. So we've met hundreds of people in the process on every continent, and we actually profoundly changed a lot of our recommendations and reviewed them over time. So it's not only that we consulted, but we meaningfully did so. And that hopefully informs the development of the framework we propose in the report and help both mitigate the disparities and prevent the harm. And ultimately, I want to emphasize that this is the right thing to do socially and from a social justice standpoint. It also is a kind of change that drives economic impact. So there's no choice to be made. We should all be aiming for that. On this note, I want to go to you, my colleague Paola, with whom I had the pleasure to work for the last 2 years, to take us forward.
Thank you so much, Benjamin. Thank you all for being here. I am super excited. It took me 3 months to get the Canadian visa, so I'm extremely happy to be here. So, imagine a technology with the power to reshape our world, a technology that could either bridge divides or deepen them. This is the reality of artificial intelligence today. We stand at a critical crossroads where the potential for social good meets the risk of perpetuating historical inequalities both within and across countries. Our project emerged from a fundamental question. How can we ensure that AI becomes a force for genuine substantive equality? This project was developed to reframe the conversation around equality and diversity in AI. Until now, these issues have been treated as marginal, but we believe they must be central to the debate if we want these technologies to benefit everyone. The lack of diversity in AI ecosystems and in decision-making processes poses significant risks, particularly to historically marginalized groups who disproportionately bear the harms and discrimination that arise from AI development. So one of the things that we would like to bring to the conversation is how can we move from the discussion only around bias to move the discussion around power and decision-making and governance at the global level. If we want to create AI systems, ecosystems, and governance processes that are truly beneficial for all, we must ensure that those disproportionately impacted by these systems are included in decision-making processes throughout the entire AI lifecycle, that they have the necessary conditions to meaningfully participate, and to ensure that innovation processes are non-exclusionary and actively work toward a more equal, equitable, diverse, and inclusive future. To contribute to this goal, the project conducted regional and group-specific consultations with a wide array of identity and group belongings. It was a global, collaborative effort that fully tried to embody the principle of nothing about us without us. We brought over 200 participants from over 50 countries. We partnered with amazing delivery partners, including people from different regions. They are going to be here today. We assembled a project advisory group and a consultations expert group, deliberately bringing together diverse global perspectives to inform formative stages of the process and the output of the project itself. So what have we learned through this journey? Diversity is not optional. Gender equality and diversity are not peripheral considerations in AI. They are absolutely central to creating systems that work for everyone. Meaningful representation matters. Those who are historically marginalized must not just be consulted, but the conditions should be guaranteed for them to lead the processes. A proactive approach is crucial. We cannot afford for harms to emerge. We must anticipate and prevent potential discriminatory outcomes. We need regulation, we need ex-ante risk assessment, we need public auditing of these systems, and we need governments to make sure that human rights are respected. Our report is a roadmap, a set of insights and recommendations drawn directly from the lived experience of people around the world. We are calling on governments, tech companies, researchers, and civil society to recognize that substantive equality in AI is not just a moral imperative. It is a practical necessity for creating technology that truly serves humanity. As we launch this report today, we invite you not just to read, but to act. The future of AI is not predetermined. It is something we will collectively create, one decision, one design, one dialogue at a time. Together, we can build AI ecosystems that don't just promise equality, but actively construct it. Thank you.
Thank you, Paola. And now I want to introduce two key people as part of this process to further talk about both the report and the policy guide. First, my colleague Isadora Hellegren, who is our Senior Project Manager Research within the Policy and Inclusion team here at Mila. She leads international multi-stakeholder AI policy research collaborations focused on advancing responsible and inclusive AI practice and policy. Needless to say that Isadora has been a very, very central player in bringing this report to life, so thank you. And then second, who I believe is joining us online, is Anita Gurumurthy, who is a founding member and executive director of IT for Change, where she leads research and advocacy on data and AI governance, platform regulation, and feminist frameworks on digital justice. She serves as an expert on various bodies, including as co-chair of T20's Digital Transformation Working Group on platform governance, and has been part of the high-level committee on Mondial +10 under Brazil's leadership. Anita also has been a very key author in this report and really helping us kind of shape the approach that we wanted to take. And so, Isadora, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Benjamin, Sophie, and Paola. It is an honor to be here with all of you today. We are finally launching the report and policy guide towards substantive equality in AI, transformative AI policy for gender equality and diversity. The hands-on policy guide that we've also put forth to support this report is really meant to assist you in implementing the key recommendations that are part of the report. The policy guide, it presents a step-by-step approach that will take you through specific action points on what you can do and check off on the list really to take you through. These action points include, or these steps include, mapping the context, understanding the stakeholders who are impacted, understanding the context in which they find themselves, understanding the rights at risk and how you can mitigate risks for the impact of systems and AI processes. This also includes identifying how to engage with all of these different stakeholders throughout the process. Just as Paola and Ben mentioned earlier, we need to start before, at the very beginning, understanding what the problems are together with the people who are actually impacted by the processes and the systems. So together, the policy guide and the report really represent a toolkit to get us started on this journey together towards substantive equality and to build the gender equal and diverse AI ecosystems and practices. So, what then are transformative AI policy recommendations for substantive equality? Transformative AI policy recommendations are concrete measures to effectively integrate gender equality and diversity principles throughout AI policy frameworks, laws, regulations, and practices. They include addressing issues of representation, whom we also heard was a very important matter earlier from Minister Anand presenting here. They include raising awareness, capacity building throughout institutions and for marginalized communities. It includes funding, and it includes revising the regulatory frameworks that we have or creating new ones where need be. So throughout the extensive consultations that Paola told us more about, that we had with participants throughout the world, we identified the challenges as experienced by them and potential pathways forward as identified by them. And these included, for example, unequal distribution of resources or a need to increase awareness among decision makers, as well as a number of promising practices from which we can actually draw learnings from real-world examples. And based on all of these themes and practices, and of course additional desk and literature reviews, and in strong collaboration with IT for Change, whom we will hear from in a minute, hear from Anita, we could then develop the Transformative AI Policy Framework and Policy Recommendations. And as Ben mentioned, based on a human rights-based approach to AI, anchored in the OECD principles and UNESCO recommendations, takes on specifically a gender equality and diversity lens by developing this transformative change for substantive equality. But what does this mean? What is transformative change? It works to remove barriers for women and other historically excluded groups to benefit from the gains from AI development. And it seeks to enable them to access and fully enjoy their rights. And substantive equality means actual equality for all. It goes beyond equal access to also work so that we have AI that benefits all. And on that note, I'll hand it over to our collaborator, Anita, to tell us more about the actual key recommendations.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hello. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay. Happy to hear that you're with us, Anita.
Yes. Is there a way my slides can be shared? Because I had an issue. I tested, but it was all fine. Let me just open the slide and try to share screen. Just a second.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah. Okay.
Amazing. Thank you. We see it.
Yeah, thank you very much. And what an honor it is to be here with everybody. And listening to Paola brought back wonderful memories of the process through which we debated, deliberated, and constructed this work of art. And as Paola ended in a very inspiring way, I think this is not really for the shelf, it is for us to act. So the policy recommendations of this report are influenced by the ambition of deep change. And we really think that this for us is a very deep personal project for all of us who've been involved here. And we truly hope that the ideal of transformative AI shall be a reality. So following up on Isadora's initial introduction, I wanted to say that an AI policy framework, according to the report, is envisaged as being transformative if it recognizes that programming for gender equality and meaningful diversity can go beyond fixing data biases in AI models. Therefore, it should include all instances where AI perpetuates inequality through social interactions, quite in the same way the Honourable Minister made her initial submissions. We need to go beyond correcting data inaccuracies and address the root causes of inequality embedded through the socio-technical dimensions of the AI system. So the key recommendations of this report are divided into 4 categories that you see on the screen. And these include measures to incentivize inclusive design and democratic innovation, enhance meaningful participation in AI governance, ensure transparency and accountability for harm prevention, and guarantee effective access to justice. Now I will go into the specific recommendations in all the 4 clusters. So,
If you just click
yes.
on your right arrow. Yeah.
Yeah, can you see the slide now?
Yes.
Thank you. So the first cluster is on inclusive design and democratic participation, as is clear there. The report recommends that policymakers can contribute to inclusive design and democratic innovation processes through various means. affirmative action to involve historically marginalized groups in AI ecosystem development, investments in capacity building and awareness raising within public and private institutions, permitting the processing of special categories of personal data to assess how protected attributes such as race and gender might correspond to proxy variables that are used in the AI model and perpetuate discrimination. And finally, public funding to promote the use of feminist techno-design principles to close the gap between technical and political fairness. We, of course, have numerous promising practices that have been enlisted in the report that demonstrate how inclusive design can be coded into the practice of AI innovation. The second cluster of recommendations is on meaningful participation in AI governance. We would all agree that it is imperative for marginalized voices to be heard in national AI governance discussions. And while this is really not the normal now, we seek to make this the normal. And we would like these marginalized voices to also be amplified in international AI governance forums. Of course, capacity building becomes a very important area here for meaningful engagement, but we also recommend that laws are needed to promote ex ante public and community participation rights in AI development. So the right to participation is available to people in determining the futures of AI that they will coexist with. The rights of the public and not only affected parties to contest AI-based decisions are very similar to societal rights, the idea of societal rights enshrined in policy documents such as the Aarhus Convention on Environmental Policy. The right of all individuals and communities to benefit from scientific progress must also be extended to AI ecosystems. This means policy should ensure that data and AI governance frameworks protect and promote public innovation with appropriate reforms to intellectual property law in order to encourage non-commercial AI that contributes to social good and collective rights. Laws are also needed to recognize the data sovereignty of Indigenous people. The third cluster is on transparency and accountability for harm prevention. Mechanisms for accountability need to be established for all AI actors in the ecosystem to prevent harm and ensure fairness. At the fundamental level, this means the right to information needs to be extended to algorithmic transparency. Policymakers should review and consider revising trade secret related provisions for enabling public interest exceptions to balance proprietary rights with algorithmic transparency. Algorithmic audits, about which Paola mentioned, are possible only when trade secrets and patent law do not work at cross purposes with accountability measures to eliminate misrecognition in AI. There is increasing awareness that black box models, especially in high-risk cases, are undesirable for societal well-being. Prohibiting these models in public decision-making processes and supporting use of interpretable models is therefore vital. Accountability also requires obligatory ex-ante human rights impact assessments to respect the right to know of people impacted by AI systems. And finally, our fourth cluster is on effective access to justice. The recommendations here in this important pillar urge policymakers to improve access to justice for individuals and groups facing discrimination and harms in relation to AI systems and processes. There is a need to empower national equality bodies and agencies to act in this regard. Product and fault liability regulations require revision to accurately reflect the complexities of AI systems and data-driven decision-making. The onus is on AI system providers, operators, and users to demonstrate the validity and fairness of their systems, reducing the burden on parties who experience harms to prove the connection between the AI system's operations and harmful outcomes. We see this in the proposed EU AI Liability Directive, which introduces a presumption of causality, assuming a causal link between non-compliance with the duty of care on the one hand and the AI system outcomes that cost the damage on the other. This principle balances the interests of claimants and defendants in product liability disputes without increasing liability risks that could hinder innovation and the adoption of AI-enabled products and services. I will stop here. Many thanks for listening.
Thanks very much, Anita. Thanks, Isadora, as well. We have time for a few questions, both online. We have someone moderating the chat. Don't hesitate to jump in online, but also in person. So is there anyone for the Q&A in person? I would invite you to go to the mic, introduce yourself, and ask your question to one of the presenters. Any questions? And I'll actually look at my colleague to see if online we do have a question. Gwen? No questions online? Yes, please. Come forward. Yes, just for everyone to, there's a mic there, just for everyone, even online, to hear your question.
Hello, my name is Sophie. I'm from ZMQ Development from India. We have an office here in Montreal, and we have an initiative called AI for Dev. My question here is that in your whole process of consultation, were grassroots women from real grassroots were also consulted in understanding the role that AI is going to play in their lives? It's for Anita and all the team that was part of the consultation and design. Was it because we come from the grassroots designs model, bottom-up design model, and my concern is that even in the AI design, inclusion is very good practice and women has to take a lead role in design, but whether we have the bottom-up model where grassroots women are participating in contributing in the design or not, in the consultations that happen,
One thing that we try to do with this project, and I think that's why this project it's a little bit different from previous initiatives, is that we included grassroots movements, the civil society organizations, not only women, but people from indigenous communities, people from non-binary identities. So we try to be intersectional. We also invited people from different regions of the world, Asia, Africa, Latin America, people from, again, indigenous communities in North America as well. So we tried to include as many voices as we could. So that's why the process took so long, because when you want to really embrace a participatory approach, then the time you need and the resources and the effort is it's quite important. So yeah, I would say that's our contribution to the debate.
Yeah, but that was the only concern, because generally in our designs for technology for development or AI for development, the inclusive movement is very natural and it has to be there. But inclusive designs are top-down, they are not bottom-up. So if you have taken a consideration about bottom-up, because we have movements like SHG movements, we have almost 30 million women who are participatory in SHG movement, which are source of ethical and correct data that is coming from the ground. Most of the models we see are missing out on grassroots data. We have health workers networks all across the world, from Africa to India, but are their voices being heard? Are their participation in the design included? If that is, it's just a comment coming from the ground.
Actually, one of the promising practices includes feminist innovation and women that are actually building AI systems with the considerations that you are mentioning. Thank you. Thank you for that question.
Thanks very much. Any other questions? Yes, go ahead, please.
Hi. First of all, thank you for the report, very impressive work. I'm Julie Soreno. I'm working more on the change management for responsible AI adoption, so more within companies, with employees. And my question is, to get it from the shelf to action, what would you say are the first major items that needs to arrive or to happen so this step by step can be implemented?
Thank you for that question. And please, Anita, Paola, if you want to jump in afterwards. The first thing I'd say is to be very mindful of which stakeholder you are in the AI ecosystem lifecycle, in the AI system lifecycle, sorry. Recommendations won't apply the same to you if you're, the policymakers than if you're enacting change management within your own organization. So I'd say that's the key piece, like context is everything, in a way. If I had to pick one place to start, I would say probably focusing on basically your governance and the sharing of power in your governance structures. A lot of these decisions, including on inclusion, ironically, are currently made by a very homogeneous set of people. I think a key point that came out of both the consultations and the research is that if you change the composition of power within organizations, whether they're governments or companies, you'll start seeing some of those topics being far more, top of mind, a bit more structural in the approach. Part of me wants to say implement all of them, but if I had to start, I would really focus on my governance structure where power sits and make sure that power is representative and make sure that the mandate of those groups include at all times making sure that transformative action is taken.
Thanks, Benjamin. Anita, anything that you would like to add?
Yes. I would like to say that considering, for instance, this is going to be implemented at national or subnational levels, I think it's extremely important for the capacity of the implementing bureaucracy and the officers to have a complete buy-in. So progressive ideas go really far when I think those that are driving them are convinced about the merit of those ideas. So that would also enable them and equip them to then open it up for dialogues with different stakeholders, let's say civil society or industry. So I think the initial impetus has to be with the bureaucracy, with the officials, with those that are going to be helming the program. So what I'm just saying is complementing what Ben is saying.
Thanks very much, Anita. Any other reactions from our...
Well, maybe just very quickly, I would like to say that we need really transformative policies. We need policies to be proactive in the sense that we need investment, we need to build capacity, as Anita was mentioning, we need to distribute power. So that's what transformative policy really mean. So yeah, just that.
Very much, Paola. Time is running, so we will be like perhaps one last question, and perhaps for your question we can pick it up at the break, if that's okay. So please, I would invite you to ask your question.
I'm going to go quickly and préface en français. I've been in IT for 25 years before I had gray hair, so my question is going to be a little bit tougher. And I understand the whole premise of the research, and I've been involved in AI since 2018. And I understand the movement of the research, but my question is going to be as follows. Given the, I'm going to be polite because there are people from the US here. As a result of the changes in the political landscape south of the border and around the world with very conservative right-wing governments, not only on the south, which will impact how women are treated generally, what do you want to do with the research going forward after that?
Well, thank you for that question. I truly believe that in the context that we are living right now, the work that we are trying to move forward, the agenda that we are trying to move forward is more needed than ever. So we know that the context is really adverse for this discourse, but because of that, we are trying to be bold in the sense that this is not only about diversity or equality. This is about the society that we want to build. We know that AI is being used by authoritarian governments, not only as an economic tool, but as a weapon. So we are aware of that, and that's why we think that the discourse around equality and diversity should be addressing the root causes of the problem. Not only, that's why we were speaking about earlier, about the discussions around bias. We need to be sensitive, and we need to make sure that we are speaking about power. So that's what we would like to see with our report.
Thanks very much for the question. Any other reactions from our panelists? No? Anita?
Thank you. I echo what you said, Paula. I also wanted to add something. I think that the context of the adversity doesn't, of course, get undermined at all. I think the writing is on the wall. But one thing I wanted to say is that the more all of us and communities such as ourselves keep talking about the need for transformative approaches to coexist with AI and not really reductionist ones, I think that discourse cannot be erased. So we really need voices to continue to ask the question, is this tokenistic? Is this nominal? Or is this truly substantive? Is this truly transformative? And those questions can be asked from anywhere. It doesn't have to be asked only from North America. So the change can actually come from the global south. So there are many small subnational governments and movements that are engaging in these conversations. And so the change can actually come from anywhere. And who knows, lo and behold, all these innumerable ways by which transformation can take birth will coalesce into something that's a large-scale movement at one point.
Thank you. And maybe two things I'd add to that, and I'm kind of partly taking off my hat as co-lead of the report, and more my hat as VP of Global Affairs. I think the point you're raising is is an important one. I started by saying that it's not because I don't think about it. I started by saying there is no choice to be made between economic growth and social equality. And so I think part of our job is going to be to start being really, really strong on that narrative. To some people, money speaks louder than social justice, but there is actual immense potential economic growth at bringing everybody that's excluded from the ecosystem into the workforce and into decision-making processes. So I think that language might resonate a little more with some of those constituencies. The second piece that I think Anita did touch upon is the US is important, but in global governance currently, there's actually more voices than just the US. There's the bilat US-China, but there's a whole set of global majority countries that are actually really, really influential in shaping the agenda in certain specific questions, particularly at the UN. So I think there needs to be more engagement, but I don't think I'm as negative as you are about on the future of global governance, but I do think it's going to require a lot of effort. Yeah. I agree, and maybe just for future reference, when we have conversations, just to make sure that people online can follow that every person speaking has the mic. Thank you for your comments. I send it back to you, Isadora.
Yes, it's a super short comment. I just wanted to echo something that Anita said as well. We must not forget that there are so many people out there working on these issues of civil society organizations that have much experience navigating these kind of environments already. They know how to do this, and solidarity and collaboration internationally and regionally is more important than ever. So let's not be discouraged. There's a lot of work to do, so let's get to work.
Thanks, Isadora, for that positive note. So thanks everyone for that super good first session. Congratulations to all the team that worked on the report. And that perfectly laid the ground for our second session, during which we'll have the opportunity to hear 4 lightning talks that will highlight global majority and a diverse set of perspectives to learn about promising practices that will showcase community-led approaches, fostering gender equality and diversity in AI ecosystems and decision-making. And having inclusion in mind, I'd like to invite all speakers to describe any visual details on their slide that would help convey their message. And so the way we'll organize the talks, I'll introduce each of the speakers. They'll do their talks, and at the very end of the 4 lightning talks, we'll do the Q&A before the break. So we'll start with Rosario Galarza. Rosario Galarza joined the International Disability Alliance in 2021 and currently is working as Intersectionalities and Cross-Movement Collaboration Senior Officer in the Programs and Impact Unit. Rosario is one of the lead trainers of the IDA Bridge training at the global level and is currently the focal point of the stakeholder group of persons with disabilities in the major groups and other stakeholders platforms. Rosario, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for allowing me to be part of the launch of this report. Particularly, it is a great honor for me to be one of the speakers in this session regarding perspectives and promising practices. I'm really sorry for not having sent my slides. Sorry for that. I didn't have time to prepare the slides. However, I would like to share with you something about this promising practice. Today, I bring that perspective of persons with disabilities as part of human diversity. This promising practice was made in the framework of RIADIS, which is the Latin American Network of Persons with Disabilities and Their Families. RIADIS is a proud member of the International Disability Alliance, the organization for which I am working now, which is a global alliance of organizations of persons with disabilities with 8 global organizations and 6 regional organizations. And the main mission of IDA is to advocate toward United Nations to mainstream and support the realization of the rights of persons with disabilities globally and ensuring the full and effective participation of them in the society, especially in all decision-making processes. The report launched today towards substantive equality in artificial intelligence presents a groundbreaking roadmap for fostering gender equality and diversity in artificial intelligence ecosystems. It challenges us to ensure that artificial intelligence becomes a tool for empowerment rather than marginalization, particularly for communities historically left behind, including but not limited to persons with disabilities. In this context, I am thrilled to share with you the promising practice led by RIADIS that embodies this vision. Early this year, RIADIS organized a workshop titled Essential Tools to Ensure the Inclusion of Persons with Disabilities in Guatemala, Honduras, and Nicaragua. This initiative was founded by CBM International and aimed to empower persons with disabilities to understand and engage with artificial intelligence and assistive technologies. The workshop had two key objectives. First, to present good practices and innovative tools such as speech-to-text converters for people who are hard of hearing and applications that describe images for people with visual impairments. The second objective was to foster critical reflections and proposals for advancing the inclusion of persons with disabilities in artificial intelligence-driven sectors. The turnout was extraordinary. Over 95 participants online, all of them persons with disabilities from across Latin America and from different constituencies, attended. Together, they engage in meaningful dialogues, including discussion of the risk of exclusion in the labor market if persons with disabilities are not involved completely throughout the artificial intelligence life cycle. This underscores a critical principle. Consultation is key for the effective engagement of persons with disabilities. As the report highlights, building inclusive artificial intelligence ecosystems requires active engagement with marginalized communities at every stage, from design to development to evaluation. Persons with disabilities must be at the table, at the front table, not as token participants, but as equal partners shaping the systems that will affect their lives. The outcomes of the workshop resonate deeply with the recommendations of this report and its companion policy guide, specifically in the following aspects. Building capacity. Stakeholders must invest in training persons with disabilities on artificial intelligence risks and opportunities, enabling them to advocate for inclusive policies and advise on ethical artificial intelligence design. Then, mandating accessibility. Developers must adhere to standards like the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, WCAG, and integrate universal design principles. Then promoting accountability. Institutions must be held accountable for consulting persons with disabilities at every stage of artificial intelligence policy making. Then allocate all the necessary resources. And I will be stronger on that because UN agency and private companies interested in ensuring effective participation of persons with disabilities and persons from diverse backgrounds must allocate budget and human resources to guarantee the provision of reasonable accommodations. By implementing these measures, we can address systematic disadvantages, reverse misrecognition, and empower persons with disabilities to fully exercise their democratic rights. Additionally, these measures are aligned with the principles of non-discrimination, equality of opportunities, value of diversity, and full and effective participation included in the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, CRPD, and in most all the human rights treaty bodies. Finally, I want to emphasize that this work is not just about addressing inequalities. It is about envisioning a future where everyone, regardless of ability, gender, or any other background, has the opportunity to be fully included in the society. Our commitment now is to contribute to remove all the attitudinal, environmental, and institutional barriers which prevent persons with disabilities and persons with other intersecting identities from exercising fully their rights. Please help us to do that, to have like a more inclusive society where every person can exercise their rights fully. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Rosario. Thank you. I'd now like to introduce our second speaker, Lynnsey Chartrand. So Lynnsey holds the role of Indigenous Projects Manager at Mila, where she's dedicated to weaving Indigenous knowledge, talents, and voices and perspectives into the very fabric of the AI landscape through collaborative initiatives. Before joining Mila, Lynnsey played a key role in managing Indigenous programming and outreach at McGill University. So Lynnsey, the floor is yours.
Hello, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you here today. As mentioned, I'm Lynnsey Chartrand, Indigenous Projects Manager here at Mila, Quebec AI Institute. I was also born and raised on Treaty 4 territory in southern Saskatchewan, and my father's family is Michif or Red River Métis. Let me see if these work. There we go. So I'm here today to share an exciting initiative that Mila launched this summer in partnership with an organization called Inspire. So for those of you who aren't familiar, Inspire is a leader in advancing Indigenous education here in Canada. Together, we introduced the Indigenous Pathfinders in AI program, the first AI career pathway program in Canada designed exclusively for Indigenous talent, empowering participants to learn, innovate, and lead the future of AI. But before I dive into what the Pathfinders program entails, let's first talk a little bit about why it's important and why it exists in the first place. So the urgency for this initiative stems from a stark reality. While Indigenous people make up roughly 5% of Canada's population, they only account for about 1% of the digital workforce. We estimate this number to be much lower within the AI space specifically. Academic pathways, likewise, into the AI space, so thinking about subjects like computer science, engineering, and math, are also underutilized by Indigenous students, largely due to systemic barriers. These barriers include things like insufficient digital infrastructure, particularly in remote communities, financial constraints, and limited access to quality education and training. Addressing this gap addressing this gap isn't just about equity, however. It's also about opportunity. AI, we know, is still an emerging field, which means Indigenous talent, ideas, and worldviews can shape its trajectory from the start instead of being left to play catch-up later. This moment is a chance, really, to rewrite the narrative, one where Indigenous voices actively influence AI development. So, how did Mila and Inspire seize the opportunity? This summer, we welcomed 11 Indigenous participants from across the country to Montreal to explore both the technical and non-technical aspects of AI. Participants developed projects addressing real-world challenges facing their communities, such as issues like accessing healthcare, food sovereignty, and education. They were also able to engage in discussions on how Indigenous knowledges and AI intersect, exploring what AI can do for Indigenous communities and likewise what Indigenous knowledges can bring to the AI space. The program is built around 3 core objectives. The first is to cultivate a thriving community of Indigenous AI professionals. The second is about amplifying Indigenous perspectives in AI development. And the third is about catalyzing AI solutions that will address critical Indigenous community needs. To achieve these goals, the program rests on 4 core pillars. The first is interdisciplinarity. Pathfinders emphasizes diverse perspectives, bringing together participants with different backgrounds and experiences. Learning was collaborative and reciprocal throughout the experience, guided by the Cree teaching of skinamatoan, or teaching each other. Elders, knowledge keepers, and AI experts worked alongside participants to create an equitable, co-creative learning environment. Second, embedding Indigenous perspectives. The program integrates Indigenous values and frameworks such as the 4 R's: respect, reciprocity, responsibility, and relevance. By weaving cultural activities and Indigenous worldviews into the program design and delivery, we aim to break the cycle of knowledge exclusion and ensure that the program is culturally responsive throughout the experience. Third, a focus on community. I've already mentioned that the projects that the participants undertook were deeply rooted in community impact. Beyond this, however, we also emphasized ambassadorship, empowering alumni to share their stories and experiences with the hope of inspiring future generations of Indigenous talent to explore AI career pathways. This ripple effect is going to be key in growing a network of Indigenous AI leaders in the future. Finally, holistic development. The program balanced both professional growth and personal grounding. Participants received mentorship, engaged in conversations with elders, and benefited from a small, supportive cohort structure that fostered meaningful connections. We also provided substantial financial support over the course of the program, allowing participants to take part in the experience without having to worry about the financial burden of doing so. So, this is well, a portion of our first summer's cohort. I love this picture. So what does success look like? Well, the skills building piece is at the heart of this initiative. Pathfinders participants also dedicated a significant portion of their time to applying their newly acquired knowledge to conceptualizing socially impactful use cases, many of which tackle pressing challenges within their communities. As the program evolves, we aim to strengthen post-program support for alumni, including by providing the time, resources, and mentorship needed for them to further develop these projects should they be interested in doing so. For instance, this summer, one team created a scholarship matching tool designed exclusively for Indigenous students. They're now currently refining their project at Mila over the course of the next 3 months as a part of our newly launched Indigenous AI Impact Residency. On a broader scale, however, the program also emphasizes ecosystem building, addressing the underrepresentation of Indigenous talent while fostering a network of support for alumni. Beyond this, the program also seeks to enrich the AI landscape more broadly by weaving Indigenous perspectives and diverse voices into its very fabric. By doing so, Pathfinders will not only promote inclusion, but also helps to create a more innovative and equitable AI ecosystem for all. Why does this matter? Without targeted interventions like the Pathfinders program, the gap in Indigenous representation will only widen. The program is a reminder that solutions created with communities rather than just for them promise to be more ethical, impactful, and sustainable overall. Pathfinders, then, is more than just a career pathway program. It's a culturally responsive model that dismantles barriers, empowers Indigenous talent, and redefines what responsible, inclusive AI development can look like for Canada and beyond. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Lynnsey. Super interesting and loads of questions to come, I'm pretty sure. We'll move on to our third lightning talk, and I'd like to introduce Rachel Adams. Rachel is the founder and CEO of the Global Center on AI Governance. She's a research associate of the Létourneau Center of the Future of Intelligence, University of Cambridge, and of the Ethics Lab at the University of Cape Town. She serves on numerous international expert committees, including UNESCO, the UN, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and the Global Partnership on AI. Rachel, the floor is yours. Are you? Oh, yes, you're there. There you go.
I am. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me here. I feel like I've learned so much already just being part of the conversations and input so far. So congratulations, enormous congratulations on the publication of this really important report. So I am here to talk to you about a project called the Global Index on Responsible AI, which was supported by the Government of Canada, IDRC, and USAID, and benefited from many of the expertise, especially Paola, who sat on our expert advisory committee. And it's a project that is, I believe, the largest study on responsible AI to date, covering a range of indicators on responsible AI that are based in human rights standards and addressing or measuring, assessing 138 countries and jurisdictions, including 41 countries in Africa, which is the center from which this project came out of, is based here in South Africa. So I'm just going to move my slides forward. if it will let me. Here we go. It was a project that took us 3 years. It was 3 years in the making. We launched it earlier this year in June. We had 160 experts from around the world because the data was collected by country-level experts in all the countries that we were assessing. And we partnered with an amazing group of research organizations from around the world, 15 in total, and 13 of which were representing the global majority. As we designed the conceptual framework, and on the slides here is a table which outlines the 19 measurement areas that we assessed as all the different components of responsible AI. But as we built this framework, we did it in consultation with groups from different corners of the world in order to understand what the literature was not telling us and the voices that were not represented about what a human rights-based approach and standards for responsible AI looks like. And I'm going to talk to you specifically about our findings in relation to gender equality, but there are a number of other thematic areas that are also of relevance to the conversation here today, including bias and unfair discrimination, children's rights, labour protections and the right to work, and cultural and linguistic diversity. So just to kind of give you a broad overview of what we found in total, and all this information is available on our website, global-index.ai, but very few countries have adequate mechanisms in place to ensure that human rights are not at risk from the rollout and adoption of AI. So all the purple and blue people that you see represented on the screen represent the countries around the world that scored less than 50 points in the index, which is covering about 2.5 billion people. I'm going to move on to talk a little bit about the gender equality related findings. Specifically, we had a thematic area that was trying to assess what measures countries had put in place to promote and protect gender equality in the design, development and use of AI tools and systems. And we were looking specifically at 3 kind of sub-indicators within this category. The first was, is there a government framework on this issue? The second was, has the government taken any actions to implement this framework? And the third were, is there any other non-state actors, academia, civil society, private actors that are doing important work to promote or advocate for these issues in the country? So in some ways measuring the dynamism of the ecosystem on this particular issue. Gender equality, unfortunately, was one of the worst performing of the 19 thematic areas that we looked at. Globally, the average score for this thematic area was 14.7 out of 100, and 40% of the countries we assessed scored 0. So they had no government framework, no country government-led activity, and no civil society or non-state actor working on these issues. The top performing countries in gender equality and AI were Canada, followed by the Netherlands, then Australia and Ireland. So this gives you, what I'm showing here on the screen is a graph with the 19 thematic areas that we looked at in the global index. And you can see the kind of light green one there represents gender equality as one of the lowest performing thematic areas. But I also want to draw your attention, I'm not sure how clearly you can read it, but some of the other low performing indicators that are of relevance here were cultural and linguistic diversity, children's rights, labour protection and the right to work. So all 4 of those thematic areas were clustered together, scoring between 17.6 out of 100 down to 14.7 out of 100 on average. There were also significant regional disparities in which regions were prioritizing gender equality in AI, with North America performing far better than any of the other regions. So we certainly have a really, really long way to go, not just to centre gender equality and inclusion and diversity in the debates around these issues, but in the action and implementation of ethical principles. This provides a little bit more detailed information about where different regions are at in terms of the sub-indicators that I spoke about. So the dark blue bar shows government frameworks, which regions have government frameworks on gender equality and AI. The lighter green shows, or the lighter sort of blue-green shows government actions, and then the sort of brighter green, so the column that's on the right of the regional clusters shows the activities of non-state actors, civil society, private sector, and so forth in this area. So you can see that the activities of non-state actors, which on the bar graph is quite significantly higher than the government-led actions or frameworks, is really bringing up the score in this area and really kind of leading the charge. Just to delve into this particular finding in more detail, and if you look on our report, there's a number of bright spots that show what these different activities in different countries look like, because we really wanted to show examples of what good practice looks like from very different country contexts from around the world. But here you can see the breakdown of the non-state actors we looked at, which were private sector, which were academia, which were civil society. So you can see that academia and civil society, which is the kind of blue colours on this bar graph, are really doing on average more than private sector actors, but interestingly in North America, there's quite a significant amount of private sector actors working on these issues. So there's a kind of equal representation of academia, civil society, and private sector in North America, and to a somewhat similar extent in the African region as well, working on gender equality and AI, which I think reflects a number of the kind of discussion points today around the fact that there really is amazing things happening. We often just don't see it well enough. And part of what this study was about was to not just rank and show where countries around the world were at, but to make visible some of these really exciting innovations and practices that are going on in different corners of the world. So I'll pause there. You can have a look at the report and discover all the evidence which is openly available on our website. And also just a thank you so much to Sophie Fallaha, who wrote the forward, one of the forwards for this report. So we've been so grateful for CEIMIA's support on this project and the citation in the new report that's coming out. So thank you all so much.
Thank you, Rachel, and it was our pleasure to support the report. And we'll dive into our last but not least lightning talk before a short Q&A session later on. So I'd like to introduce Petra Molnar. Petra is a lawyer and anthropologist specializing in migration and human rights. She's the Associate Director of the Refugee Law Lab at York University and a Faculty Associate at Harvard's Berkman Klein Center for Internet and Society. She's also the author of The Walls Have Eyes, Surviving Migration in the Age of Artificial Intelligence, published in 2024 by the New Press. Petra, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, everyone, and thank you to the organizers for having me. I'm very sorry I can't be there in person, but it's my absolute pleasure to round out this wonderful group of panelists that have given us such a deep dive on the specificities of different communities and really how important it is to always pay attention to power when it comes to thinking about what we innovate on and why. I wanted to take the conversation to a specific context, and that is borders and migration. It's an area I've been working in myself, and I think like many of us in the room, we all have complex migration stories that often animate how we look at the world and why. And for those of you who might be familiar with my work, you know that a lot of it is quite dystopic. It looks at the high risk experimentation at the border and in refugee camps and spaces of humanitarian emergency, focusing on really dystopic projects like robo-dogs, AI lie detectors, data gathering, and the kind of importance that we need to place on taking a human rights-based approach to some of the sharpest edges of innovation that we are seeing today. For those who are interested, I did have a book come out on this earlier this year, but I don't want to talk about that today. What I do want to pose is a forward-looking question that I hope will also allow us to move the conversation to where the wonderful report that we're celebrating today is taking us. And that is some of the broader concerns around how do we actually build a different world that recognizes the power imbalance in the way that we think about technologies. Because for me, technology is ultimately a lens through which to try and understand power and how power operates in society, and why there are so many differentiations in terms of who is actually around the table when we innovate and why. Borders and migration, again, are a fascinating case study for this because I think they show some of the harshest manifestations of this power differential, this kind of testing ground that has developed around the use of technology. But how do we build a different world? Recognizing, of course, that there are these power differentials, but making space for expertise and from the ground up approaches to these issues. I want to talk about one specific intervention that we have been piloting at the Refugee Law Lab where I work, and that is called the Migration and Technology Monitor. This started off in 2020, and honestly, at first it was going to be yet another platform to house work, by academics and civil society and journalists, and kind of a home base for technology and migration work. But it grew into a community. And that is what I want to reflect on today. In 2022, we launched our first fellowship program for colleagues on the move to tell their own stories on border surveillance and technologies at the border. And we decided to move in this direction for a variety of reasons. One being that we really feel committed to the basic premise of redistributing resources from the global north into the hands of communities on the ground. We do this through a variety of ways. Number one being that we pay our colleagues on the move a living wage. The first cohort got $50,000. The second cohort, which I will tell you about, got $30,000 due to funding restrictions, which I'm sure many of us in the room are also feeling. But we felt really strongly about the fact that we did not want to contribute to a piecemeal re-granting, but rather give people time and space and recognize the importance of their work, and also allow for slow work to actually happen, to try and foster this space where people have time and space and resources to think. And it's been really fascinating because my colleagues who are in various states of displacement and movement have been working on really fascinating things. Some, like Veronica Martinez and Wael Harsifi, are journalists. Veronica lives at the border of Mexico and the United States and has been looking at the discriminatory impacts of the CBP1 facial recognition app, discrimination on gender grounds, which I think is especially relevant given our conversation today. Whereas Wael Harsifi has been looking at the surveillance of refugees in Asia, where he was displaced for many years and stateless before his move to the European Union. So we have colleagues who look at the sharp edges of technology, but what's been also interesting is to see the movement towards assistive and resistive technologies that communities themselves on the move see as relevant and important to foster and develop. For example, Neri Santaella, my colleague from Venezuela, developed a specific chatbot for and by Venezuelan refugees to connect people with psychosocial support, lawyers, healthcare, specifically designed again for and by communities, very much part of the ethos, nothing about us without us. My colleague Rajendra Paudel is a former migrant worker who was himself a victim of surveillance in the Middle East region and now has become a social media influencer and a connector for Nepalese migrant workers who are going to places like Qatar and developing this cachet of knowledge. Last but not least, my colleague Simon Drotti, who's a data analyst and a refugee in a refugee camp in Uganda. Him and his team developed a really beautiful digital psychosocial archive that he is calling the memory scroll to act as a memory-making device for communities who are displaced and on the move. So again, there's this other angle to it too, recognizing that technologies that do use AI can actually also be assistive and resistive to the kind of broader power differentials that are inherent in how we innovate and why. This year, we were very lucky to have a second cohort of colleagues join us. We have Grace Gichanga, Matthew Lubari, Mona Shtaya, our colleague Jamil, who is using a pseudonym for security reasons, and then our colleagues in Mexico, Mariana Rangel and Judith Cabrera, all working on very diverse projects again, from the surveillance of Palestinians in the occupied West Bank to using trainings for repair technologies in Uganda, different chatbots, and everything in between. And we just launched our third cohort, our call for fellows for the upcoming year. And we are very, very curious to see how we will all continue learning together. So just to wrap up so that we have enough time for conversations, you know, for us, trying to work from a community-based perspective and a from the ground up perspective is key here, because it is also about challenging who counts as an expert in these types of conversations. And I recognize the irony, you know, of me talking about this here, because of course it's also important to pay attention to who takes up space and oxygen in these kind of conversations. But what we're trying to do in the creation of the migration technology moderator community is to place our colleagues on the move as the true experts, because they are on the ground and they are living the impacts of discriminatory technology day in and day out. And perhaps it's also a reminder that these kind of quieter, smaller, community-based ways are actually the way that we are going to shift power and the kind of conversations that we need to have in this space. And for us, it's been an incredibly instrumental way of trying to come together and redefine and reimagine what kind of world is possible. So thank you so much to the organizers for having me, and I really look forward to the Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Petra. And thanks to all of our speakers, Rosario, Lynnsey, Rachel, and Petra, for really sharing a series of example and work that really shed the light on the challenges of real diversity and gender equality and AI, but also practical actions and initiatives to, I would say, walk the talk to address all the challenges and all the efforts that are needed. A bit of, yes, Q&A, but starting with a bit of timekeeping. We are late, of course, because the conversation was so rich. So what we'll do is that we'll shorten the break, and rather than having a 15 minutes break like it was initially planned, we'll have only a 10 minutes break, which will then leave us now 5 minutes approximately for questions that will then be continued, discussion will continue during the break. So I would like to invite questions either online or in the room. And there's a question online. Gwen, are you happy to share it? Thank you.
So there was a question, but actually it was for the there was a question targeted to so the collaborators and the people involved on the project. So how to envision educating non-technical individuals to avoid amplifying the current digital divide, from Anto Saldania.
Any of our speakers or online?
We have another question as well.
Okay, perfect. Let's like take all the questions and then we'll pass the mic for the answers.
And another question. So aside from development and research, will the Pathfinder program also promote more representation from the First Nation at governance level and policymaking regarding AI?
Thanks, Gwen. Perhaps we could start with the question on Pathfinder.
I'd actually love to hear the question one more time. Sorry, would you mind repeating it?
Yes. So aside from development and research, will the Pathfinder program also promote more representation from First Nation at governance level and policymaking regarding AI?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there was a great amount of attention given in designing the curriculum for the program to make sure that, yes, we were looking at kind of, the machine learning components. There was a strong technical training piece there. But likewise, we felt it was really important to create a program that really gave kind of a global overview of some of the key kind of conversations, some of the issues at stake with regards to responsible AI, with regards to AI safety, policy making, data sovereignty. So we really allowed space for those conversations. We had experts come in and speak on various subjects over the course of the program. And in fact, the projects that were delivered over the course of the initiative, there was both an AI solutions piece, but there was also participants were also encouraged to really think through the project in its entirety. So think about, again, that data sovereignty piece, to think about community engagement. Are there policy considerations? What is your plan for sustainability, for the longevity of these initiatives potentially? So this was of course a pilot, so we're building on it, but we really, again, with a great amount of kind of attention to that, made sure that there was space for those conversations as well. And so I'd like to see that carried over into the year ahead and in the future.
Very much. Any other reactions to the question that was asked previously? And since I also have that question, as a reminder to the speakers, how do you envision educating non-technical individuals to avoid amplifying the current digital divide? I don't know if anyone online would like to take it. Perhaps it will be a...
Maybe I can try to reply this question, sorry. I think, I am thinking about that we need first to advocate for the implementation of the Pact for the Future that was approved in the Summit of the Future, because it has one annex about Digital Global Compact, and it has references to also technologies, but also to artificial intelligence. That's why I think one thing first, in order to educate, is to make all governments aware of that, because most of the governments have signed this Pact for the Future, but they maybe don't know how to implement. And if all the groups, especially the groups that are more left behind, the marginalized group, can advocate for that, doing some lobby with government officers and also with private sector and others, maybe we will be able to also educate people about that. That's why I mentioned capacity building is really important. If we don't invest in capacity building, it's very difficult to raise this issue about artificial intelligence, especially because most of the times when people raise this issue, it's only to mention about what are the opportunities and the positive impact. But we are not aware most of the time that they have some like a negative impact and some like a risk that they need to know. And in order that developers know about that, is that we need consultation with different groups, especially with persons with disabilities and other persons with other intersecting identities.
Thanks very much, Rosario. And I suggest that if there are any additional questions, well, on the chat, don't hesitate to write them down, and we will also have a bit of conversation at the end of the session today. But for any next question on the room, I would suggest that we bring the questions up to the coffee break, and I will invite you to be back in the room in 7 minutes, like around 10:45. So it's a super short break, apart if I have information that we're okay. No, that's a short break, but see you in a few minutes, everyone. Thank you for your attention. Thanks to our speakers.
Thank you so much.
This is just a mic check for our live stream on YouTube.
Attends, je pense que oui, j'ai qui? Paola, Ricaurte, Quijano, Adamunas, Carlos.
Just a sound check.
C'est quoi le J? Juan, hein? Juan Carlos.
Mic check numéro 3. We'll be starting in just a minute. On va commencer dans 2 petites minutes. We'll be beginning in 2 minutes, everyone. Thank you.
Welcome back, everyone. We almost have everyone ready for the session, as well as our chair and moderator of the third session for this morning. So no worries. So the next session will feature a discussion between project partners and collaborators sharing insights on the challenges and opportunities of building inclusive AI ecosystems. So I'll hand it over to Benjamin to chair and moderate the panel. So Benjamin, you have all the time for you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and I know we're short on time, so I'm gonna really just jump right in and introduce our panelists. So first, Paola, Ricaurte, Quijano. I know that some of you might have just joined online, so I will reintroduce you briefly. Paola first is the co-lead of this report and a full professor in the Department of Media and Digital Culture at Tecnológico de Monterrey and a faculty associate at Berkman Klein Center at Harvard. You co-founded Tierra Común and serves on several expert committees, including, of course, the GPAI, but also UNESCO. Wanda Munoz, who is joining us online, I do want, before jumping in your bio, to kind of really formally thank you. Wanda was the driving force behind this project being adopted by the Responsible AI Working Group, GPAI, and so without her leadership, none of this would have taken place in the last 2 years. So thank you, Wanda. And of course, you are an international consultant with over 20 years experience in the fields of public policy, disability inclusion, gender equality, and humanitarian disarmament, a member of the Feminist AI Research Network and UNESCO Women for Ethical AI platform. You've published on matters related to disability rights, intersectional models to respond to gender-based violence, inclusive AI, and autonomy in weapon systems. Thanks for joining us online. Juan Carlos Lara at Derechos Digitales, who I want to emphasize was a delivery partner in this project. So Juan Carlos is co-executive director, of the organization, where you previously served as research and public policy director. A fellow lawyer by training, I was glad to see that. Juan Carlos has experience as a legal and policy analyst, instructor and researcher on issues related to data privacy, surveillance, freedom of expression, and access to knowledge in the digital environment. And last but not least, Mpo Moyo at Research ICT Africa, also a delivery partner in the project, who is a seasoned researcher and consultant at Research ICT Africa with vast experience in communications, media, and technology. Mpo has led pivotal projects including analysis of the ICT access, accessibility, and use of ICTs by persons with disabilities and diversity, with disabilities and diversity and gender equality within AI in sub-Saharan Africa. So thanks to the three of you for joining us online. Thank you, Paola, for being with us in person. And maybe the first question that I'm going to ask is really the same question for each of you. And we've been running tight on time, so I will do my job, which is really to keep you the 3 minutes per answer. But all of you have been really deeply involved for many years now in this field and deeply involved in this project, either as co-lead, as initiator and lead, as well as delivery partners. So you've helped shape the project, its direction, the outcomes. And I want to know from your own perspective, what has been the most significant aspect of this project? What do you think that should be, in a way, recalled? And maybe I'll start with you, Wanda.
Thank you, Benjamin, and thank you for your kind words. It's truly an honor to be here today, and I want to start by thanking every one of the hundreds of persons who contributed to this project. So regarding your question, I want to quickly mention 4 significant aspects of this initiative that to me are at the core of its added value for the AI ecosystem. First of all, it's evidence-based. So you can find many publications on the potential or on the opportunities of AI to basically help you achieve any policy objective you have. But in some cases, this potential has not been proven yet. So this initiative is different in that it examines actual practices like the ones that were presented earlier and documented benefits, and thus the policy recommendations are really based on what we know that gives results. Secondly, this initiative builds on human rights standards and methodologies on anti-discrimination and gender equality, which have already given results. For example, the project adopted the approach that has been mentioned before, that is a transformative approach that aims to identify and respond to the root causes of inequality that AI can challenge or can amplify, depending on what governance frameworks we adopt. I really like how Paola mentioned that a transformative approach also leads us to think, we could say, like beyond bias, like bias is an aspect of it, but taking a transformative approach makes us think in terms of who has decision-making power in the AI ecosystem, who has access to funding, who is allowed to participate in the discussions on AI governance mechanisms, and other important matters that are still often left aside on many AI and equality discussions, but without which no significant change can be achieved. And the fact that this report adopts a transformative approach, even mentioned in its title, I think it's a good practice that really must be applauded. And third, it's action-oriented. I think there's now a lot of documentation on AI risk and harms. And this report focuses on how do we actually respond to this, what do policymakers need to consider in AI governance to avoid perpetuating inequalities, and also how do we ensure access to accountability mechanisms when AI results in violations of human rights, because we know that these are already happening. And last but certainly not least, the project team has ensured that this process truly involved the meaningful participation of the largest diversity of stakeholders that I have ever seen consulted in any AI-related research. And to me, this is at the core of the success. I will leave it there because I know we can come back to this later in the panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Wanda, and we'll have the chance to come back to some of those remarks. But to sum it up, evidence-based, HR and transformative approach, action-oriented and meaningfully thought of in terms of participation. So thank you. Juan Carlos, and by the way, I have no preference. I'm really just going by order of who I'm seeing on the screen. So Juan Carlos, up to you.
Sure, can you hear me well?
Yes, thank you.
Yes, so this has been a fantastic opportunity for us, and I really wish to, first of all, thank the invitation to participate in this launch. We are very happy to have been contributors for this as delivery partners, and I really wish to highlight and acknowledge the work of my colleagues at Derechos Digitales, Jamila, Paloma, Mayra, Maria, and Alejandra, who were conducting all the interviews and the focus groups and the workshops and all the meetings that led to, and the data collection that led to this participation. And the most relevant thing that I really wish to highlight here is the kind of contribution that we have been trying to produce at Derechos Digitales in this kind of environment and this kind of work. Can you hear me well? Sorry.
Yeah, we can still hear you well.
Okay, thank you. Because in the case of Derechos Digitales, we're a policy advocacy organization based in Latin America. We do all things digital rights and human rights. However, when we face the problems with artificial intelligence and how transformative these technologies present themselves at, we understand that these are also ways in which historic structural inequalities keep continuing to present themselves in Latin America. And that's one of the key findings that even from our own political perspectives that we found from the data collection, and that's one of the biggest findings that we have in the delivery that we did in the larger report. But to understand also how that work tries to complement the larger efforts. In the case of Latin America and Derechos Digitales, what we have also tried to convey from the perspectives that we gathered from the data collection is one of the findings that we have in terms of how Southern perspective, Latin American perspective are excluded in the global stage, and how even within Latin America, we see that groups are marginalized, excluded from discussions on AI, or their perspectives are made invisible. They're not often acknowledged or recognized as expert views or even as stakeholder views in some of the applications of these technologies. And we want to highlight in that same regard, and with this I finish my answer too. We also wish to highlight the needs for participation in a way that is inclusive, but which in turn requires resources, requires efforts by policymakers, by companies themselves, by civil society and academia in the spaces where they do hold some degree of power, in order to make that participation broader, more viable, more meaningful as well, and also more inclusive of those groups whose continuous and structural marginalization can be further entrenched by the application and deployment of artificial intelligence technologies. So in that regard, our work as an organization tries to contribute to social justice. But in this case, what we have tried to gather from our own expertise is how the views of different stakeholders support that view and also contribute to larger recommendations and data points that helped to build the recommendations that we have seen from the beginning of this session and this whole launch event. So we are very happy to try and contribute in collaboration fashion with other organizations. But thank you.
Thank you. And maybe before going to you and Pots, for those of you both in the room and online, maybe to give you clarity on what it meant to be a delivery partner, because I think that some of those remarks are really kind of anchored in the pivotal role that you've played in the project, is as part of those consultations, and we had a question earlier about was this kind of top-bottom or listening to grassroots, and so a key component of this project was making sure that we go to local organizations that really know the field and know the people, so that they could really mobilize and hear through the consultations with a context-sensitive lens, and so those were our delivery partners who really met the people, gathered the data, analyzed the data. So those are, in a way, this is the anchor through which Juan Carlos and I'm assuming you and Po are gonna be talking. So on this note, off to you, Empo.
Thank you very much for the opportunity and for also the privilege of being a delivery partner in this project, and also having led in the sub-Saharan consultation phase. And I worked with our executive director, Dr. Alison Gilwald, and Pierrine Lux on this project. And some of the notable things that stand out from this project was the strong emphasis on intersectionality in AI development and policy making, highlighting the critical need for diversity and gender equality. It also goes beyond surface level inclusion to address deeper systemic and structural inequalities that define the challenges that are faced within sub-Saharan Africa. By tackling issues such as exclusion, bias, underrepresentation, the project provides practical recommendations for creating inclusive AI policies and development, skills development, and epistemic justice. And when you consider our framing of justice from Research ICT Africa's perspective, and when you're looking at the context of developing a transformational AI policies, we cannot really have true transformation without redressing historical imbalances, going beyond equality or opportunity to actively offering preferential or exclusive opportunities to those who are historically disadvantaged. We believe that this aligns with the broader goal of creating AI ecosystems that promote equity, justice, and substantiative inclusion. And despite the achievements and the projects the project had, we also had some limitations. The consultations were conducted exclusively online, unintentionally excluded digitally marginalized groups. And this is a significant concern in Africa, where digital exclusion disproportionately affects those at the intersections of multiple inequalities, such as class, race, gender, and disability. Key groups, including people with disabilities and non-binary individuals and gender non-conforming communities, were not directly engaged. We tried to engage them through the associations, like we said, but also we must also realize in the African context that some of these groups face systemic exclusion and in some cases criminalization. So it was difficult to then find these different groupings when we're doing the consultations. Overall, at least we managed to speak to a large sample of individuals and had the consultations online. And we also had a number of platforms where we could also share the findings, and the participation was great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and we'll have the chance to get back on some of those points, and definitely that's another piece, I guess, that I should highlight from our delivery partners is, as we went through this process, a lot of thought was given not only to the initial structure of the consultation, but some of the challenges that emerged throughout. So, for example, in certain regions, particular groups or marginalized groups would not show up for different reasons, like criminalization, like you just said, Empo. And so we've tried, and when I say we, really our delivery partners gave a lot of thought to how do you create a consultation that allows for those voices to come out in places where that might be more complicated. I want to go to some of the specific comments you've made. Actually, that is so bad. This is the beauty of hybrid panels. No, I want to go to you, Paola. I was gonna stick to my online folks, but actually, Paola, the co-lead of this project, so I absolutely want to hear from you, even though you're saying no. What stood out for you in this project? You've really been with Wanda the driving force of it. So what made this project very significant from your perspective?
Thank you so much. First, I would like to thank our amazing delivery partners. It's been truly honor to be working with them over the course of these 2 years, because they are really committed to make sure that we honor the motivations that inspired this project. And as Benjamin was mentioning, of course, one of the obstacles that we faced throughout the process is that if you want to make sure that the process is inclusive, participatory, and global, it's important to acknowledge the differences and the barriers that different groups face to participate. So for me, one of the key questions is how we make sure that, for example, in this project, but also when you speak about AI development or AI governance, how do we make sure that we create the conditions for people to participate, to have a voice, to make decisions about all the processes, all the phases of technological development? So for me, probably one of the key lessons, and it comes also from the feminist movements, is that the process matters just as much as the result. So with this in mind, we took great care to ensure that the project's governance model and the participatory process, the methodology, was meant to really allow all the participants to actively shape the direction of the project. So that's why I'm really grateful for the learning journey, for the insights that all our amazing delivery partners brought to the conversation, not only in terms of the methodology, but also in terms of the framework that we use to speak about these issues. So thank you.
Thank you, and that's a great segue to you, Wanda, because the next question I wanted to ask you echoes what Paola just said, where process is equally as important as result. And you've mentioned that one of the things you thought stood out of this project is how inclusive the process was. I'm curious to hear you both on what you thought made that process like special or unique. Like, what is it, what are the key pieces that you thought you hadn't seen elsewhere? But also, particularly grounded in your long experience as consultant, why do you think it matters in the result itself, like in the AI policy making afterwards?
Okay. Thank you, Benjamin. I will start with this little introduction. If there is one takeaway that I'd like you to remember from my intervention today, it's this, and actually it links to one of the questions this morning regarding where do I start. To me, if you are in the AI ecosystem, there is no single action that you can take that is going to advance diversity and gender equality more than reach out to discuss and include in your work organizations of persons from marginalized groups, human rights groups, and feminist organizations. Now, if I was in Montreal, I would be asking those of you in the AI industry and policy making to raise those hands and respond to a couple of questions I will ask you. But since I'm online, I'll give you a pass, so please just respond in your minds. Do each of you know which are the main representative organizations of persons with disabilities in your country or in your cities? And what about indigenous people or other marginalized groups in your context? How many of you have reached out to them and offer to dialogue or to raise awareness about AI and to learn more about their concerns? These consultations, the consultations that were carried out for the report, unfortunately, are not common, and frankly, I don't think they're really systematic at all. And to me, this is one of the major gaps in AI governance. So, in this context, what I think makes the project special in this area is that since the beginning, it was one of the objectives to include persons with marginalized identities in a meaningful way. And meaningful is really the key concept, because we don't want to have a person just to be sitting in the room so that we can check a box without them having power to impact the outcomes. So here in this process, colleagues with marginalized identities were respectfully invited, received information, there were safe spaces so they could share their concerns. There was funding that I hope we can come back to that later too, to be mobilized to pay for their expert contributions, and their input was really considered for the report itself. So in fact, one of our colleagues told us in a feedback session, and I quote, "I am very glad because this is the first time that I see my priorities actually reflected in a final report that I am consulting consulted for. So my wish is that what he could say could be the same of AI governance frameworks, and that we, the society as a whole in our diversity, we would see our national and international governance frameworks and say, this really reflects my concerns and I see my rights and I know how to access them. So the report and the policy guide really give tools in this regard and to move forward with this approach. And just in 15 seconds, I want to say that to me the process is as important as the result, because if you have, first of all, the result will never be as good and comprehensive if you don't have the input from the diversity, no matter what you think you know or you have read, if you don't have the lived experience of the different groups. And secondly, there's not going to be a buy-in, because no matter, as I said, how good is the text, if you did not make part of it and of the process, you do not understand it and you do not like it, and really there is no buy-in for it. And thirdly, and I know this is a priority for many of you in the room, regarding creating trust in AI. And trust in AI, you cannot create it as such. Trust in AI will come from the fact that people are able to participate in governance discussions, and this input is reflected in the government frameworks. And in as much as we can see that AI is not giving more power to the rich and affecting those who are already marginalized, but the fact that it's really benefiting everyone, and if there is AI harm, we know how to demand accountability and access remedy and reparation. And all this cannot be achieved if the process are not really inclusive and allow for meaningful participation.
Thank you, Wanda. And I did make strong note of no single action you can take will work better than literally reaching out to communities. And I think, I want to say we're at Mila now, so Research Institute. And so I take really good note of that, because I feel sometimes in research we feel, we're not deploying a product or we're not the government. And so there's a bit of a tendency to go, directly to the research, which we didn't do here, and I'm proud of it, but I think it's a great lesson or learning more largely. Juan Carlos, I want to turn to you in a way to ask you a bit more of your specific perspective as so both you and EMPO are doing a lot of work around those questions and around creating meaningful opportunity for participation. So I'd like to hear you a bit more about what are some of either the lessons learned or the perspectives that have been emerging through your work, particularly to the Latin American context.
Sure, and thank you for that. So the Latin American context, as I had mentioned beforehand, is facing historic structural inequalities that also affect not only certain communities that are affected worldwide, but our own rural communities, indigenous peoples, and many more. And that has become also enhanced or worsened by some degree of discrimination that has grown given the current migration waves, especially after the pandemic. However, some lessons that we've gathered from this work towards the future are related to some of the key concerns for derechos digitales. One of them has to do with the notion of embedding intersectional thought and intersectional approaches to the several things that we do, both in terms of the policies we impact, but also in the work that we conduct. And that was a key part of this project too, in our contribution, but also something that needs to be an integral part of our continuous efforts to contribute to the larger discussions on human rights and technology policy. Second, it's important for us to understand in all of this, given the larger context in which all of these technologies are deployed to, that we need to create structural pathways towards these transformations, and that requires, as has been mentioned before, investing in institutional inclusion, systemic reforms, some funding criteria that take into account some still ongoing inequalities too. And though many of these things are covered in the recommendations for AI, it's important to also understand these in the larger context, because this is part of the larger struggle for social justice. And therefore, I think that we need to take as lessons for our own work towards the future. Also, two other things that I think are highly relevant. One has to do with the development of accountability mechanisms, given that global gaps, north-south gaps, also can lead to different situations or capacity to hold companies accountable or to have public officials be accountable, which calls for tools like human rights audits, algorithmic transparency frameworks, but that should be localized to empower civil society and not just localized in wherever a company wishes to be made accountable, if at all. And finally, this is all a big part of the transformation of global AI governance too, considering that meaningful participation, ethical policy frameworks, future initiatives to need to prioritize collective rights, such as ensuring information to AI systems, fostering meaningful participation, fostering cross-regional collaboration to advance to standards that acknowledge the needs for different populations across the world. And because we have this as part of this effort, we also need to understand it as part of our larger efforts towards social justice and global inclusion as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I do want to also reiterate a point that you made earlier that I thought was really interesting, which is about being seen through those consultations and more largely through your work, that a lot of the people that you were able to bring to the room and whose voices then were echoed in the report are often not even granted the status or the perception of being experts. To start with, or stakeholders. So I thought that was an interesting point, like how to make sure that when we build a project, we also kind of recognize expertise that goes just beyond AI. So thanks for sharing that as well. Empo, I want to go to you now. You've been, of course, a pivotal person, and your organization, a pivotal organization in organizing the extensive consultations, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa. And I'd like to hear you on some of the realities and challenges that you faced in the region, particularly as it bears to fostering equality and inclusion.
Okay. Thank you so much. So some of the issues that we face in Africa, one of the stark realities is digital inequality, which I mentioned earlier, which exacerbates inequality in AI participation. And as I mentioned, many of the marginalized groups, including women and persons with disabilities, face systemic barriers to accessing technology and education, leaving them out of the AI ecosystem. Even for the population online, they are not online equitably. Another key challenge that we found during the consultations is that the lack of representation in global AI development, where African languages and cultures are largely absent. And this perpetuates bias and exclusion in AI tools and systems. Furthermore, there's limited progress in local AI innovation, and this is hindered by insufficient level of digitization and digitalization in sub-Saharan Africa. And this in turn restricts the advancement of inclusive practices related to diversity and gender equality. So what we actually found from the research that we did is that Africa is still at a stage where we're still just trying to get the basics right. And before we even do that, if we're not able to do that, then we're not able to meaningfully participate within the global discourses on AI and even in AI development. So the consultations highlighted the need for local solutions. And the need to invest in upskilling initiatives and for underrepresented groups, and the need to develop policies that prioritize data justice. And another recommendation was to address structural inequalities through inclusive research and design practices. And from our work, recent work, from a feminist perspective, through the lens of embodied data, it focuses on the understanding of how bodies, particularly African bodies, are turned into data, highlighting the power imbalances and inequalities inherent in this process. This perspective is critical for challenging colonial legacies in data practices and advocating for ethical government frameworks that protect marginalized communities. So in our work, we emphasize the need for consent, transparency, and autonomy. We have contributed to the global discourse on ethical AI while addressing regional inequalities. Our work also has focused on addressing systemic challenges and intersectional inequalities in AI ecosystems, promoting AI frameworks rooted in data justice. This we do through our Just AI program. And this involves giving voices to underrepresented groups in AI design processes. So regionally, what we are doing and what our focus is amplifying marginalized voices. And we are then introducing AI and disability, which is what I'm doing for my PhD. And this is part of the work that we are going to be doing in RIA Research ICT Africa. And we are also advocating for tailored solutions that align with Africa's socio-economic realities. So this also involves not only advocating for inclusive data sets, but also addressing the Global South divide in data governance. By pushing for frameworks that respect cultural context and intersectionality to ensure that AI systems globally are representative and equitable. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I think that I'm really seeing convergence between what you're saying and Juan Carlos earlier at this call in a way to look at the more larger context as we embark through consultation and the question of accessibility in the AI ecosystem. So thank you for that. Paola, last but not least, I want to turn to you. This report, although it offers a set of recommendations that could find ways and be applied to multiple stakeholders, there is a strong focus on policymakers and governments. And I think a lot of that is, thanks to your leadership and your thoughts. So could you elaborate a bit on what you think is the role of governments in ensuring that AI ecosystems promote equality and inclusion? And really you're a co-lead, so part of me wants to ask the question, why did this need to speak to governments first?
Thank you very much, Benjamin, for this question. I think that we are aware that AI is a highly concentrated industry and that is dominated by a few countries in the world and companies as well. So this concentration is also a source of global inequality. So as Paul was mentioning, we are aware of this global gap in AI governance. So that's why I think that governments around the world should make sure that we can guarantee the participation of every country and every region, but also with the participation of every country and every region, we guarantee the participation of the communities that belong to these countries and regions. So I think that the countries that are less equipped with infrastructure, resources, or data, when they are excluded from the global conversation, they are also excluded from the possibility to guarantee the rights for their own populations and communities. So sometimes I think of regulatory inequalities in a sense that we as countries and communities of the majority world, we don't have like the strength to face this global AI divide in terms of governance. So I think that governments must, as like those who are responsible to make sure that these policies and resources are distributed among the population, that governments in our regions, but in general at the global level, should guarantee that everyone is involved in the discussion. So that's why I was insisting in that in the need of transformative AI policies, not only at the local, but at the global level, because we need to make sure that the governance model is changed, that is more democratic, but also, as Paul was mentioning, that the innovation processes are also democratic. So we need more of that, and we don't have like countries and regions of the majority world, we don't have enough resources. So we need to make sure that we are also distributing the possibilities and the resources to make sure that everyone has like the same possibilities to participate in the discussion, but also in the innovation.
Thank you, and I want to point out that you're a leading force in one of those projects that really kind of enables particularly feminist communities to build their own AI system. So I think it's a great way of demonstrating that beyond policy work, there's actual design choices that can be made in the way we build AI systems and ecosystems. I will slightly reform the last question. I guess that's the privilege of being the moderator, and then I put my panelists on the spot. But there's this, for me, that the last question initially was really kind of around what you can learn from this report, but I'm really thinking in this room there's a lot of people who will continue carrying work around gender equality and diversity in a way like, we're speaking to a group probably of committed folks. So I'm curious, like, it could be in this project or beyond this project, but I'm curious to hear each of you for about 1 minute, if there's one key consideration that you'd like anybody who undertakes work in this field to keep or to have top of mind as they undertake a project, what would that be? And maybe I'll go with who raises their hands. I acknowledge I changed the question, so whomever feels good to go. Wanda, go ahead.
Thank you, thank you. Do you give me just 1 second? I'd like to also add a quick perspective on why the focus on governments, from my view.
Of course.
It's because from a human rights perspective, because they are the duty bearers. Governments actually have the obligation to consult and to include marginalized groups in policy making, and these ones have the right to participate and to contribute to shaping the policies that affect their everyday lives, including in AI governance. And I want to mention this because sometimes I think certainly not this audience, I hope, but some people feel like they are doing a favor to include marginalized groups. And no, actually, if you are not doing it, you are failing to implement your human rights obligations. And I think we need to shape the conversation in this, to this other perspective. And secondly, to answer to your question, to me, the single issue also to keep in mind is that achieving substantive equality requires time, effort, and funding. And we saw it in this project. We see it in every initiative truly committed to making equality real. You need to mobilize funding, and you need to have specific budget lines to ensure meaningful participation. These resources are needed, for example, to implement awareness-raising sessions and trainings for marginalized groups who often have been excluded from formal education and have no awareness to meaningfully engage in these discussions, to ensure accessibility, to organize interpretations and translations, to pay for the expertise from marginalized groups. And here I want to insist, because often when they are invited, it's like you are doing them a favor that they can be in the room. But no, they are contributing their expertise, and they also deserve to be paid like everyone else for doing this work. So I just want to insist on this part, that you need to have funding. And next time, I'm going to give you a heads up. Next time I meet anyone from the industry or the government that wants to tell me about how good they are on equality in their policy, AI policies, I will ask you first, please tell me how you ensured the meaningful participation of marginalized groups. Show me your budget lines for this purpose. Show me how you are monitoring, and then we can discuss about equality on that basis. So we need to move beyond saying the right things to really having the monitoring frameworks that show the progress and the funding that actually allows you to implement this in practice. Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks for highlighting that that human rights framework actually require consultation. That this is probably one of the great contributions you've made to this project, to remind us of basing it into human rights discourse. I think, Empo, you had raised your hand, so I would go to you.
Thank you. So thank you so much. Wanda did echo a lot of my sentiments, but I think one of them that I want to emphasize is empowering communities through education. There's a lot of awareness that needs to be done, not only at the grassroots level, but even at a policy level, to understand what AI is, what it could do for countries, and what harms can come about through AI, and how we can meaningfully participate from an African perspective is one of the things that I wanted to say. And we also need to ensure that we have resources to ensure that we have a lasting impact and participation in AI ecosystems. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Juan Carlos, yes?
Extremely briefly, but I want to support a few of the previous points. Because I was going to mention awareness raising. We cannot just arrive to some groups and tell them, hey, you are excluded from this, as if it were something out of science fiction or anything. Policy discussions and technology discussions, isolated or even joined amongst themselves, they can be difficult. We need to maintain a work of raising awareness constantly, especially those of us who are involved in these areas. This cannot be siloed out as an academic or activist concern for certain groups, but rather a large whole of society approach is needed too. Secondly, the appeal for resources is a constant one that we need to also ask from funding organizations. But thirdly, and something that was especially valuable for us as a delivery partner in this project, was the interdisciplinary approach to research and fact-finding, and especially to find out more about those communities that many of us, from our seats of expertise, could not possibly reach or know about. And this has been also a through line in this whole launch, in which certain groups might be outside of our view, outside of the purview, or outside of what we consider our constituencies or our audience. However, if we wish to change all of society and all of governments, either locally or globally, we also need to understand that key alliances and the key expertise outside of the work that we do on a daily basis is needed in order to provide better recommendations and also to hopefully gain impact at the local and global level. Thank you.
Thank you. And last but not least, Paola.
Yeah, I think that I would insist that with this report, we are trying to make a call to the governments of the world to take AI seriously, not as a hype, but as a technology that has a deep impact, profound implications for human rights, economic and labor inequalities, cultural and linguistic diversity, and the health of our democracies worldwide. So governments, as Wanda was mentioning, have a critical responsibility to guarantee human rights. And for that, they must design public policies that ensure everyone has the opportunity to participate in technological development, access their rights, and engage in decision-making processes regarding the development, deployment, and use of technologies that shape their lives.
Thank you. And maybe just if I remove my hat as a moderator for 2 seconds and kind of take my co-lead hat here at Mila, one point that came out a lot is resources and time. And I think from my perspective, but I really want to commend CEIMIA as well, is to kind of accept, if you're in a privileged institution in one of the leading AI ecosystems, that bears responsibility. So it's a wonderful, wonderful platform that we are given here at Mila, that CEIMIA is given. And I'm really, really proud of having been able, thanks to folks like Isadora, Anand, and others in this project, to kind of really sit in that responsibility, to not avoid it, to not feel uncomfortable with it, but to make use of it. So I think that's something, in a way, to colleagues in leading AI ecosystems, to carry that forward in ways that are meaningful beyond talking on panels. In this project, that meant taking it to 2 years instead of 1, because consultations were fruitful and we needed to adjust. And that meant paying the experts. So I do want to invite people to take that seriously when they embark onto those kind of projects. On this note, we have a little more than 10, I'm proud of my timekeeping, we have more than 10 minutes for Q&As. So thank you first very, very much for you online. I know it's not always as exciting as being in person, but it's been wonderful to listen to you. And I would take questions both online and in the room. And we do have something online.
Yes, thank you. So one question from Guillaume Bergeron. So what would be the key points to address in a national AI strategy to mitigate the digital divide? For example, should a focus on AI uses to fight the digital divides be the priority? or restrict AI uses to certain uses as to not generate more divide?
Thank you. Who wants to take this question? I mean, I have thoughts on it, but I want to sit in my moderator role.
Yeah, I can share just I think it's a complex question, but I just want to share a couple of thoughts. First of all, one, like I said, is the consultation of marginalized groups. And I think the response to the digital divide is really important. But I think one of the key issues that we still don't see as much as we like is that I think the national priorities on AI for an AI policy or for an AI strategy really should come with the participation of the large diversity that we see in our countries. And this is not yet the case. And I don't think this is the case really in any region. It's not that this is a problem for Latin America. I think no region really has done the in-depth consultations with all the marginalized groups, like we said. And let me give you an example from Mexico, that there are many legislation proposals on AI, proposals on AI, and none of them had done any consultation with marginalized groups. So I think we need to go to a place where we can say, what do we as a country, Mexico and any country, want to do on AI? What is acceptable to us? And we can take references from other regions and from other countries, and it's great, but we cannot copy what is being done in the global north. We need to say, for us in Mexico and our diversity, do we want to use a risk-based approach or not, first of all? What is, if yes, what is the unacceptable risk for us? And maybe we don't want to use AI for this because it's not worth the risk, or it's not worth the risk to marginalized populations. And these conversations are not taking place yet, so this is where we should start, in having these really national conversations that include the diversity of groups and sectors.
Thank you. Does someone else want to chime in? Yeah, go ahead, Juan Carlos.
Yes, sure. I think it's a very relevant question, and speaks to something that Paul had mentioned at the beginning of the session too, because of these inexistent, like very palpable inequalities such as connectivity gaps and so on, that how those carry on over to these new certain technology usage gaps too. So it essentially worsens an already bad situation. And it's a complex question too, because whether this is something that should be tackled by AI policy specifically, when we should be probably seeing it in the larger economy policy or technology policy, of which AI is in part a fraction when you're thinking about national development of AI. It does require that some of the things that we have been discussing with regards to AI go a bit broader, and that happens in part through the improvement of infrastructure and how it's maintained, which is a resource issue, but especially in the sense of capacities, and how meaningful digital inclusion requires also a significant effort for all of society, and not just for young age or certain populations, but focus on those who are further marginalized by existing inequalities. But the larger digital divide is a broader problem that should be acknowledged by any AI national strategy or national policy. Also involving in this the marginalized communities, but also all of the communities that are currently impacted, in order for any kind of AI policy not be a policy directed towards certain groups, but rather to the whole of society that can be transformed through these technologies in order for it to be transformed positively, if at all.
Thank you. And Empo?
Thank you so much. I think from our perspective, the work that we have done, we have found that there's been a digital inequality paradox. And what we have found is those who are online have the gap between those who are online and those who are offline has widened, even with the emergence of advanced technologies. And so what governments and stakeholders need to focus on, they need to refocus resources and attention on foundational issues like digital inequality, rather than exclusively advancing cutting-edge technologies. So they need to invest in building policy capacity, understanding AI and diversity and equality, and then also enabling them to formulate policies that address the wicked problems, policy problems that I mentioned, which is inequality and the digital inequality paradox. Thank you.
Yeah, maybe just to add one more idea and building on what Juan Carlos was mentioning, I think AI policies, we need to think about AI policies not as AI policies. We need to think about a comprehensive set of actions that need to be taken, like in education, research, innovation, the economy, trade agreements, environmental issues, labor policy, labor regulations as well. So when we think about AI policies, we need to think of a policy that is comprehensive of all the dimensions that are involved when we think about AI systems, their ecosystems, and their global modern governance model. So that's something that we need to take into account. We need to think about policies in education, policies in labor, in trade agreements, and data flows.
Thank you. Just for questions, the best is to go stand behind the mic, just because we already have a question waiting. So after you.
Yeah, thank you very much to all the presenters and for the report. I look forward to dissecting it more. So my question is around this AI divide, and I think there were multiple mentions about infrastructure. And this is where the resources, the material, because these are things that will last for a long time. And there is this compute north, compute south reality that is very clear. Can you say a bit more on how infrastructure, including compute, can be used more inclusively? And now there are market forces in these, and not everyone can build compute and make compute. So I think this is also one of the bottlenecks of like, how do we translate these divides into real material things that we may or may not know, or we may not see all the positives as well.
Thank you. I mean, I'm seeing you, Paola, react. Do you wanna go first?
Well, I think this is one of the most complex questions to address in terms of inequality, infrastructure and inequality, because we don't have like computing power, we don't have like the resources as, I mean, small countries or countries that are not really like developing AI as a consolidated industry. So for me, the question is, well, if we know that infrastructure is concentrated in the private sector, how can we build the conditions for the public sector and other communities to also participate in the governance model of infrastructure and to develop their own infrastructure? So for example, in Latin America, I think, because it's the region that I know more, that we need governments again to have the vision and the political will to articulate a development model in which infrastructure is shared by different governments, different countries. So it's the only way that we can develop like actual, because we know that this is very, very, very expensive, actual computing power, actual infrastructure to develop alternative business models and also alternative ways of participating in the AI development ecosystem. So I would say we need more political will, and also we need more collaboration among those who are not now participating in developing infrastructure for AI.
We do have, for those of you online, we do have a line of questions. So I would take one more if there's a quick additional thought. on this? And if not, I would move to the next question. We're good? So next question.
Yes, thank you so much. So I'm an undergraduate student at McGill, and I'm also leading ENCO Justice Canada, which is a Canadian chapter of a nonprofit that's all youth-led around responsible and safer AI for all. And I really appreciated the point of AI education and AI literacy being raised. And I think it's very important moving towards the future to understand, even having access to technology, understanding what it means to have informed consent and the critical thinking skills to understand engagement with this technology. And so I'm curious if you could share your perspectives on this topic when it comes to policymakers and beyond, some channels for promoting AI literacy and any work that you may be doing in this field.
Thank you. Is there someone that wants to go on? We have about, we're at time, but let's say we'll take 3 or 4 more minutes to complete this answer, and the other questions in person maybe we'll take during lunchtime. So I don't know if one of you wants to step in. Well, if not, I'm happy to take that question over lunch when I take off my mic, and I would direct you towards also my colleague Anna Jan, who is behind, who's led quite a lot of training for Mila, so quite a lot of thoughts to share on that. Maybe that gives us time for one final question, a quick one with a quick round of answers, and then I'm gonna call it lunchtime.
See, mine is not a question, but it's a comment in the design model. See, for last 25 years, the way technology has taken over, like a natural resource into the hands of everybody, and even at the last miles in Africa, India, all over the world. But the designers have not understood how to utilize it. First of all, in the top-down models, again, I am repeating that, people have not been given right to connectivity as right to life. Connectivity is like a natural resource of a volume, which is bringing in a large footprint of data back to the systems. But we are only looking as application developers. We need to relook at the designs model, that is the technology-linked integrated designs model first, and then its application coming bottom up. And that can only be achieved if we look at rights-based approach and right to connectivity as right to life, right to my data as right to life. Unless we do that, we are not going to go anywhere, because AI is an extended application that is coming into being just because of the data footprint that is coming. Today, if you look at a mobile phone, what is there for grassroots communities? Nothing. Are the women, pregnant women, the dying women on the grassroots, can you leverage and save their lives using a connectivity opportunity? No. Can the data footprint of the women and the people on the grassroots can save their lives? No. So we need to look at with the rights approach, and right-based approaches about right to connectivity as right to life. And last point is, if you look at 17 SDGs, they have not recognized connectivity as a resource. They are recognizing connectivity as an application within resources, but not as a resource. So there are 17, there's a space for 18th SDG that needs to be fixed in as connectivity to be looked with the bottom-up approach. That's all.
Thank you. I think that aligns quite well with a lot of the content of the report. I'm seeing people nodding. I don't think there was an open question, but I think a lot of those comments are well aligned and seems to be in agreement. So perhaps...
Can I comment on that?
Yeah, of course,
Sorry.
of course. Please jump in.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry to jump in. Yeah, I just wanted to share another comment that we heard in the consultations from some of our colleagues with disabilities in Latin America, which some of them questioned if we, in a way or another, could link AI as a human right, considering it as a reasonable accommodation for persons with disabilities. Reasonable accommodations, for those who are not familiar, I encourage you to read the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, but are tools or devices that can help people to develop their capacities. So these colleagues were saying AI should be considered a human right because now it is already being used for us to be able to access, for example, images, even if we are blind. And so the fact that a few people with disabilities have access to AI technology, but the majority who still live in poverty do not, are increasing inequalities. So should there be a right to AI when it serves as reasonable accommodation? So I think this is also the kind of discussions that we should be having too from an equality perspective.
Thank you. So on this note, I do want to sincerely thank each of you, Wanda, Juan Carlos, Empo, and of course you, Paola, for joining the panel in the event, and for contributing both for the, I guess, the genesis of the project and then as delivery partner. We really couldn't have done it without you as people and then you as organizations. So thank you so much. And we'll go back to Sophie.
For the super good moderation, very strict with timing. Good job, and thanks to all the panelists and speakers actually for the whole for the 3 sessions today. And today was a rich and fruitful conversation. I say that I've learned a lot from the different examples, initiatives that we heard from. Really showcasing that small initiatives can have a great impact. We presented an exhaustive report. We presented a step-by-step policy guide to support policymakers to build a more inclusive AI ecosystem. And we now have tools to really pursue our efforts toward creating better AI for everyone. And I'd like to invite you to scan the QR code for both the report and the policy guide that you see on the screen. So that you make sure that out of the session today, you at least have the tools in your pockets or on your phone, and I'm happy to see all the phones out. I'd like to, I have a series of thank yous, and first I'd like to thank Benjamin and Paola for your intellectual leadership and to really guiding the project for like the past 2 years. And sharing a bit of your values that really act as anchors and pillars to the project. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank all the project team from both Mila and CEIMIA, Isadora, Anna, Laetitia, Stephanie for scoping, implementing, putting together all the pieces of the puzzle of a complex project and delivering the report and policy guide. Also thanks to all the communication teams, both CEIMIA and Mila as well, who supported the delivery. Thanks to all contributors, delivery partners, knowledge partners from the ground for the report and the work. Thanks to all the panelists and speakers that spent times with us today to share their input, to share their experience. Thanks to Tricot for the catering service that will come after for the lunch. And thanks to all of you attending the event in person here and online as well. All of you now have a bit more tools to act and promote the diversity and gender equality in AI. And thanks as well to Mila for hosting the event, very much appreciated. Un grand merci à tous d'avoir été des nôtres lors de cet événement. Merci de contribuer à la promotion d'une réelle diversité et égalité des genres en IA. And I'll hand it over to Benjamin for the concluding remarks for Mila. Thank you.
Thank you. So I want to send back the thank you to you, Sophie. As I said in the panel, I think some of us who are privileged institutions and leading AI ecosystems have a role to play in enabling these kind of projects, and so you've really showed up. You as an organization, you as a person have showed up, allowed that. Isadora, of course, who is, a ton of people were absolutely essential in this report, but you've carried it over time, so thank you a lot for your leadership. There's a few people that I want to name that I would love to give a round of applause to. Those kind of events, they take a lot of time and it's very invisible work. So Laetitia, Gwen, Myriam, Mathieu, Claire, Joël, Émilie, Marc-Antoine, Carl, Ludovic, Désiré, François, Henri. Thank you. So they're kind of all behind, or some of them are online, but thank you very much. The two last things I wanted to say, because I will leave it to you, Paola, to close and to talk more about, I guess, in depth about what this, what we were hoping for this report. So these are really just kind of two thoughts in passing. The first one was the last 2 years have given me a chance to kind of reflect upon what it means, really, like when we talk about intersectionality. So I'm a queer person, so part of this project, resonates deeply with me. I'm also a white man in Montreal. And so part of taking that responsibility seriously, and yesterday over dinner, we were talking about the fact that very often those projects and those roundtables or those panels happen, of course, in the course of a day, and you kind of just see all the men leaving the room. Like it doesn't really matter, like it's not of concern to them. So I guess for me, one of the things that I want to carry forward for myself, but that I hope that the people online and the men online can carry forward is, we have a role to play in this dynamic, of course, and to really kind of embrace that and this is systemic discrimination, so it doesn't have to feel personal, but we have to be in the room and we have to take that responsibility. So kind of reflecting on that and jumping into this chapter or this work, I think is very important. I would not love myself if I didn't take the time to thank my colleagues at Mila and our funders at Mila. This work is important and it's possible because we've put the funding and we've put this as a priority, so thank you. The last but not least is to you, Paola. This is unbelievable, but this report is out after 2 years. Everybody who works with Paola, I'm sure, can tell that you're absolutely gracious and kind and smiling. I would also hate myself to leave people on that note for what I think is just a brain power and a committed person towards equality. You've been, in a way, really the driving force into making sure, holding us accountable as to what the process looks like. And really living your values. Like you said, process is as important as result, and I think you've really kind of held up to the highest standard in that regard. So it's been a real privilege to share that journey with you. And up to you.
Oh, well. Thank you for being here. I just prepared some words. I'm not going to read everything, but I need to read because, I get very nervous. So today we're launching a report aimed at advancing the discussion on participation and the democratization of AI systems, ecosystems, and governance at both national and international levels. And we think that advocating for more diverse AI is not merely about being inclusive or doing good. It's about fundamentally transforming AI as a technology that in its current form is exclusionary and perpetuating inequalities on a massive scale. The AI we have now is a tool built by the privileged for the privileged. AI is enabling the concentration of wealth, knowledge, data, and infrastructure in the hands of a few, with direct consequences not only for the economy, but also for democracy and the lives of people. So this is why reframing the conversation around AI is so important. Participation in the decision-making processes and governance of AI is not just a nice to have, it's critical. AI is already impacting all of us, even those who are disconnected. So we know that AI technologies are being weaponized against marginalized groups at borders, in credit systems, public space, health and welfare programs, and more. Women, girls, children, elderly individuals, persons with disabilities, and workers are being harmed by these technologies. And also, we know that some of them are losing their lives because of them. So we recognize what is at stake, and we must all commit to changing this reality. So I would like to extend my deepest gratitude to the incredible team at Mila, especially Benjamin, whose vision, wisdom, and extraordinary partnership have been invaluable on this long journey. And for me, it's been really a true privilege to be here as part of this amazing team. As we mentioned all this day,
we really tried to honor the motivations that inspired this project by having a truly diverse team with young people participating as researchers from different national, ethnic origins, different languages. It's been a real challenge, but I think that, of course, the report can be perfected, it can be improved, but we are proud of the final results. I also want to thank Isadora for her extraordinary ability to make things run smoothly. Anna for her advice, to the team at CEIMIA, Sophie with her wonderful leadership at GPAI, Leticia that has been like a truly honor to be part of her like amazing energy. Stephanie, Noemi, and others that really were deeply committed to have made this report possible. So we hope this report serves as a tool for change, helping governments and other stakeholders join the fight for equality and global justice. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and have a good end of your day to everyone online. Then again, don't forget to scan the QR codes. And for everyone in the room, I would like to invite you for lunch to continue the rich discussion. Thank you, Paola. Thank you, Benjamin.